This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Donald Trump, Nikola Tesla, time travel. What do these things have in common? You're about to find out. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me is a gentleman that we've become good friends with over the years. He is a gifted author and a deep researcher and a deep thinker as well. He's the author of such best-selling prophecy books, author and co-author, as The Babylon Code with Paul McGuire, Trumpocalypse with Paul McGuire, The Military Guide to Armageddon, and The Military Guide to Disarming Deception with Colonel David Giammona, Paul Begley for Revelation 9:11, and his new book, which comes out on September 17th, which I'm sure is to stir the pot, both in a good way and with the troll army just sitting and waiting to pounce out there. The Trump Code, exploring time travel, Nikola Tesla, the Trump lineage, and America's future. We welcome Troy Anderson back to our program. Troy, it's good to see you again.
It's great to see you, Derek.
Boy, this is really, really an intriguing subtitle: Time Travel, Tesla, and Trump. How do these things come together, and what inspired you to tackle this as a subject for a book?
Well, I guess maybe give a little background here. So like you mentioned, my first book was The Babylon Code. So that was an expose of globalism, exploration of mystery Babylon. That came out 9 years ago with Paul McGuire. And there's a popular pastor. He loved that book so much that he decided to deliver an entire box of the Babylon Codes to the Trump team in early 2016. And then 2 months later, Trump announced that Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as his platform for president. Now, I don't know there's a connection, but we've always been curious. And then Trump got elected. I remember Franklin Graham posted on Facebook, it's the God factor, because it blew everybody away that he actually got elected. So then Paul and I wrote a book called Trumpocalypse. And I did this interview with Billy Graham back in 2013 and for a 7-part WorldNet Daily series. And he said, when God sent the prophet Jonah to Nineveh to warn them of judgment, that the king and the people repented. And he believed the same thing could happen again this time in America. So I was so inspired by that. And in Trumpocalypse, we called for a National Day of Repentance. And there hadn't been one since Abraham Lincoln was president. And a friend of ours, Kevin Jessup, he ran with it. He persuaded Rabbi Kahn to be the spokesman. And then it actually happened. It was a gigantic miracle. It's called the Return National Global Day of Prayer and Repentance. September 2020, the National Mall. 250,000 people showed up. 42 million people watched this. And then Trump didn't get elected. And everybody's like, okay, what happened? And so then flash forward to April 8th of this year, you got the Great North American Eclipse. It goes through all these towns called Nineveh. And so I wrote a story for Charisma called The Great North American Eclipse. Is this our Nineveh moment? Is this our chance to turn back to God right before this election? And then Charisma got a hold of me and asked me to write the Trump Code. So the Trump Code puts together this 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of what's going on. How does Trump fit into this unfolding end time scenario? Is this our Nineveh moment? And that's sort of the background.
Nineveh moment, for people not familiar, of course, that's the story of the prophet Jonah, who was sent against his will to the king of Nineveh, the Assyrian king, and demanded that the city repent. Jonah was kind of disappointed when they did, and God's judgment relented on Assyria for a little while. How do you see that paralleling with the situation of the United States in 2024?
So, all these books I've written have looked into, are we really moving into these end time events the Bible talks about? And what seems to be the center of gravity, the focal point, is this push for globalism, this push for some kind of global government, essentially. And the Bible warns us about this in the book of Revelation, that the Antichrist and false prophet will preside over a one-world government, economic system, and probably a cult-based religion. And so it seems like everything we see happening today is moving us towards that. The world is being prepared for the arrival of the Antichrist and this world government. And the only thing standing between us and that is America. And so the globalist elite view America as a bloc because we have a Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. and we're been traditionally resistant to globalism and this push for a world government. And President Trump also opposes that. So his credo was Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as his platform for president, and he stood in their way. And as we've seen, they've tried everything they possibly can to get rid of him. Impeachments, criminal charges, assassination attempt, you name it, they've tried everything. But, God has somehow kept him, alive through this whole ordeal. And so we now stand at this pivotal moment in history where we can reelect him and maybe push back against this evil agenda, or we can go the other direction with the Democrats and probably most likely move into this great reset plan the World Economic Forum has announced. So we're at this critical moment in history, and so the Trump Code explores this whole thing.
Donald Trump, I don't think anybody would argue that he is a deeply flawed man. He's been married previously. Marriage broke up. He is got a sort of a New York attitude that rubs a lot of people in the Midwest and the South the wrong way. He's kind of brash, a bit of an egomaniac. I would argue that you kind of need that if you're going to try to run for president or office at that high level, to subject your family to that kind of like the kind of media scrutiny, especially with the rise of social media in the last few years. In fact, I even had a college professor 40 years ago, long before the internet was developed, suggest that you need to be a bit psychologically unbalanced to be willing to put your family through that kind of an ordeal just to run for president. So by definition, all the presidents that we have had in the United States are by definition insane. But for some Christians, it's very difficult supporting a man like Donald Trump because of his very public behavior, his flaws in the past, some of the things that he said off the cuff that are that rub people the wrong way. How do we as Christians reconcile Donald Trump the man with what appears to be a divine purpose?
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is generally agreed upon by most people, and so he's a flawed man, just like all of us are, and it has these various character issues that rub many people wrong, right? And so we actually have this like Trump derangement syndrome that half the country seems to have. So but in every I'm a reporter. I've covered politics for three decades for mainstream media. And whenever you're in politics, you see the behind the scenes. There's a lot of corruption. There's all kinds of flawed people. There's all kinds of crooked stuff that goes on. And so when we go to the polls, we're not electing Jesus Christ to be president. We're electing a flawed human being who's just like us, who sins and does all kinds of stupid things, evil things. And so it's a choice between lesser of two evils, is the way that most political scientists talk about this. And so, instead of looking at the person, their personality, it's not many people see it as a personality contest, but in reality, it's about the policies that this individual is going to implement. And so, like I said, if we vote for the Democrats, and these people are just, sort of figureheads, there's a very powerful forces behind the scenes that, they largely control what goes on now today. And so it's the policy positions. Is the Republican platform perfect? Of course not. There's all kinds of, flaws in that and things that aren't biblical also. But the central thing that I'm concerned about is, are we going to move into this global system the globalists want? And I would say that we're probably going to see an acceleration towards the World Economic Forum's Great Reset Plan, sort of the reblended New World Order if we elect a Democrat here. So that's the key focus of my investigative work over the last decade, and why I wrote all these books. And I mean, at the heart, I'm hoping that people will repent and turn back to God, and we'll see this revival grow and see a turnaround in our world, so our children and grandchildren can have a good future. So I think we stand at this crossroads, and that's the choice we had to make here.
We have seen some of the images and video of Donald Trump's son, the son by Melania, Barron Trump, graduating from high school recently. That kid is tall. Remember him just a little boy when President Trump entered the White House in 2017, and here we are 7 years later. The kid is about 6'5" and getting out of high school. There's a connection to a series of novels written back in the late 1800s. An attorney by the name of Ingersoll Lockwood that featured a character named Baron Trump. Now, Baron spelled slightly differently, a single R. Baron Trump, the son of Donald, is got two R's in his name. And I'd seen some writing about this years ago, some of the strange parallels. You make this an important section of the book, The Trump Code. What is the connection between the Baron Trump novels by Lockwood and Donald Trump today?
So yeah, the Trump Code explores a lot of these different prophecies pertaining to President Trump, both these older ones, how he may fit into unfolding biblical prophecies, and then also this interesting series of novels that Ingersoll Lockwood wrote in the 1890s. So it's called the Baron Trump Collection. He's sort of this obscure lawyer and author, and this is around the time that Alice in Wonderland was very popular. And so he actually wrote a series of children's novels, fantasy novels, time-traveling adventures. And so it involves this boy named Baron Trump, and like you mentioned, the name's spelled a little bit different than President Trump's son, but the drawing on the picture of these books, which are, they're stored at the Library of Congress, it resembles Baron Trump's, when he was a boy, the president's son. And, of course, he's very tall now, but when he was a boy, it's a striking resemblance on the cover. And so in the novels, the boy goes on these time-traveling adventures guided by the master of masters, his uncle Don, and he lives in Trump Castle on Fifth Avenue, where Trump Tower now stands today. And they had this grand old time, all these sort of, just sort of wild adventures, time-traveling adventures. And so people, there's been stories in Newsweek, Politico, I think Vanity Fair, that kind of thing, over the last 8 years. What is this all about? Was this guy prophetic? Is it just a coincidence? There's been TikTok and YouTube videos, got millions and millions of views. People wondering, is Trump a time traveler? So that's like the fun part of this. And so, people have had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at Amazon. Some of the republished versions or editions of the Baron Trump collection have sold way better than any of my books, which is perhaps appropriate. But it is intriguing that there seem to be these parallels of you use the word prophecy. Would you go that far, or is it are these strange coincidences? How do we explain the apparent parallels between the stories of Baron Trump written by Lockwood 130 years ago and what's going on today?
Yeah, so in the Bible, God did show different prophets the future. How did he do this? Was he just through a dream, a vision? With the Apostle John, there's a question about did he actually take him to see into the future? There's also that incident on the Mount of Transfiguration where both Moses and Elijah joined Jesus there. Did they come from heaven, or were they brought from the past into the future? God is outside of time and space. Obviously he can control all these different things. And so those are all questions we ask in the book. And so then there's just regular people like Ingersoll Lockwood. Could he write something? Could God show him the future? Well, think about the books by George Orwell, 1984, and look at what's going on today. Big Brother, groupthink, the surveillance state. That seems prophetic in nature. How about Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, the burning of books? Look at cancel culture today. We're watching that unfold. We're Aldous Huxley in Brave New World. And so there seems to be something very significant, mysterious about writing. And so when somebody's writing, can God just sort of guide them and foretell the future, perhaps? This is what's happened with the biblical prophets. And, or could it be a cult in nature? Could there be, a dark undercurrent to all this? So in the Trump Code, we explore all this and sort of ask, how does this fit into, unfolding biblical prophecies? And what did Lockwood somehow foretell us something important about the future?
Are there, not wanting to give away too much of what's in the book, but are there things that we can possibly foretell or things that we should be looking for that were foretold perhaps by the Baron Trump novels?
Well, the most intriguing book is the last book in this three-part series. It's called The Last President. And so in this book, a populist president is elected. Then afterward, it says the anarchists and the socialists converge on Trump Castle in New York City, chanting "Death to the Rich Man." Military forces are mobilized. Perhaps some kind of civil war breaks out, And so this has been, the focus of some of these news articles is, is could Trump be the last president? Could he be the last duly elected, legitimately elected president, or could, in this now could Kamala Harris be the last president? What it was this prophetic in nature? How does this fit into unfolding Bible prophecies? So we explore all that in the Trump Code.
Nikola Tesla is mentioned here, and anytime his name pops up, it's very intriguing. I actually did an interview with Stan Deyo years ago about Dr. John Trump, who is an uncle of Donald's, who apparently was sent by the FBI to investigate and recover Tesla's remaining papers when he passed away in the 1940s. What are the connections that you explore between Tesla and Trump in the book, The Trump Code?
Yeah, so man, this is one of the most surprising things. So Ingersoll Lockwood writes the Baron Trump collections for these time traveling adventures, and then in the real world, Trump's uncle's a very highly esteemed professor at MIT, a physics professor. And when Tesla died, so Tesla is sort of considered the architect of the modern world. He's this genius inventor, lived from the late 1800s to 1943, and actually was living in different hotels in New York City when he died. And he's credited now with inventing what became our modern electric grid. He supposedly invented free energy. You could tap into the other dimensions and pull energy in, but Edison apparently didn't want to do that, and because there's trillions of dollars now being made off of coal, gas, natural gas, that kind of thing, electricity. He had invented I think a remote controlled boat in the late 1800s, and so now they say that many of his inventions could have led to wireless technology, cell phones, all that kind of stuff. And then also at the time, there was great concern during World War II that the Nazis were developing nuclear weapons. And so could they, like we later did, attack us with airplanes like we do in Japan? And so he supposedly claimed that he had invented a death beam weapon that can vaporize the supposed incoming Nazi Air Force. And so when he died, the government naturally wanted to see what he had. And so there's like 80 trunks of information that it was contained in different hotels. And so they brought in President Trump's uncle to look at all this stuff and determine, was there, is this stuff we want to keep the Russians and the Germans and others from getting a hold of? And so Trump's uncle came back and said, essentially he didn't think there was anything really of great concern there. But then the government allegedly kept a bunch of these files. And so I actually interviewed an author of the several books on Tesla, and the History Channel did a special on this recently. And so they look at these missing files. So has the government used the missing research of Tesla to develop all kinds of super high-tech technologies over the last several decades, top secret weapons, that kind of thing. And Tesla, had apparently, supposedly developed some kind of time traveling technology. And so when we think of time travel, we think of H.G. Wells, the time traveler, or Back to the Future. You jump in the car and you go zip it into the future. But does the government actually have stuff like this? So it's sort of an interesting question. Recently, The Sun, Britain's largest newspaper, filed a Freedom of Information Act request in relation to all the UAP, UFO sightings and the congressional hearings. And these documents came back and said that the government perhaps does have time travel, some kind of primitive time traveling technologies, involving quantum physics and that kind of thing. And then there's been various articles like Scientific American and things like that talking about, research has been done into this field. Perhaps CERN is doing research into this kind of thing. So we don't know exactly what they have. My co-author, Paul McGuire, he's done a lot of research on this. And he said he believes what the government actually has could be 100, 150 years ahead of what we see technologically today. So it's interesting. We explore this in the book, and what exactly does the government have, and so it's an intriguing question.
Looking for the hand of God at work, not just in Donald Trump, but in all of our lives, in the great shifts and changes of history. Is something that Sharon and I have been trying to do for quite some time. We were talking before the program here about how I spent a good deal of time researching the presentation I gave recently at the conference in Ohio about the history behind the formation, the restoration of Israel as a nation in 1948, and how that history is rather hidden from most of us. But when you look at it closely, I think the hand of God is pretty evident in that event. But we also recognize that we are not, as Paul wrote, not wrestling against human opponents. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Darker forces at work trying to frustrate the plans of God. Of course, they won't. Psalm 2 says, "He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord holds them in derision." What are some of these plots and schemes of the enemy, and how do they relate to the characters you write about in the Trump Code?
So the Bible tells us there's a great interdimensional spiritual battle going on in the background between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, between the forces of God, the angelic realm, and the forces of Satan and the demonic realm. And so much of what we see playing out today is we're sort of the pawns on the chessboard of this great battle that's going on, and it's going on in other dimensions. And now scientists are now saying there could be at least 10 different dimensions, and this is essentially what the Bible tells us. And like I mentioned, God is outside of time and space, and He has ultimate control over human affairs. We do have free will, but because He's so much more intelligent than we are, He has control over the destiny of humanity. And so He can manipulate time, space. He can change things. And the Bible talks about God raising up leaders and deposing leaders and things like that. And that the steps of a righteous man are guided. And, He has a destiny for all of our lives from the foundations of the world. So, and He also calls us to engage in spiritual warfare. The Bible talks about, resist the devil and he will flee. It talks about, Jesus told us to occupy until I come. And so, a lot of people have asked, is it just a fait accompli that, we're going to move into the events of the book of Revelation? Is there anything we can do about it? And that's why I was so inspired by the interview of Billy Graham, is he said he believed that we could, change God's mind, essentially, by repenting, by turning back to God. We could see a turnaround. And so that's been the message and the theme of all my books, is that, just like Jonah, warned Nineveh, we need to turn back to God, and we could see some kind of turnaround. We could see this. There's been these signs of revival going on across the country. You had the Jesus Revolution film came out about a year and a half ago. Then you had the Asbury revival and the baptisms at colleges across the country. Here in Orange County, Greg Laurie's down there. It seems like every few weeks baptizing thousands of people. I just went to church on Sunday, and the baptismal must have been surrounded by several hundred people. I've never seen something like that before. Wow. So I think as people are waking up to the sheer level of evil going on, a lot of people are turning to the Lord. And so, God loves us. He's very patient and long-suffering. And so I believe His heart is that we would turn to Him and bring as many people into the kingdom as possible. And that was Jesus' last instruction to us, to take the gospel to all the world. And all of the law is summed up in love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. And that's our charge as Christians. And so that's the message I hope people take away from these books. And
that can be done regardless of what happens on November 4th at the results of the election. You mentioned the curious numerology around the name Ingersoll Lockwood, the author of those Baron Trump novels. What is it, and what do we draw from that occult signature?
As I recall, if you look at the numerology of Lockwood's name, I think what I put in the book was, it says the storm is upon us, or something like that. I forget the exact words, but it's there's some kind of connection to the if Trump's elected, could he, because his big thing is, I'm going to dismantle the deep state. And so there seemed to be some kind of connection to Lockwood's name and that claim. I forget the exact terminology.
Mm-hmm. The the deep state has been aligned against Trump, just like Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. We were surprised to learn from friends on the ground there that Netanyahu, contrary to the way he's portrayed here in the West, is considered an outsider there, just as Trump is here in the United States. We see the political forces aligned against Donald Trump. Not just the Democratic Party, but you've got Republicans who refuse to support him, and then you've got others operating in the shadows, the intelligence community, and so forth. Are there other organizations working in the shadows to try to frustrate the will of the American people, at the same time try to frustrate the will of God?
Yeah, and this is something I've explored in all my books. These secret societies. Of course, people know about Yale University's Skull and Bones. We've had presidents who've been members of Skull and Bones, and could Skull and Bones have connections back to the old Bavarian Illuminati from the late 1700s? It appears that they might. Of course, you have like the Bilderberg group, it's a more open group, but they have these, sort of secret meetings of bringing the elite from around the world. The Council on Foreign Relations is hugely powerful in American politics. The Royal Institute of International Affairs in Britain, sort of their counterpart over there. You've got the Bohemian Grove here in California, where the political leaders and elite gather for very strange ceremonies. So there's all kinds of sort of semi-secret and occult nature kind of groups. Of course, Freemasonry is one of the largest secret societies in the world, and Jim Marrs is the late Jim Marrs wrote a book called The Illuminati, the Secret Society That Hijacked the World, and he wrote a number of books about this. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and I interviewed him a couple of times. And he claimed that the Freemasonry, essentially at the top levels, is called Illuminized Freemasonry. So there's very powerful forces in the background that have a great deal of control and power that they're sort of hidden. And many are occult in nature, and so that seems to be the one of the predominant power structures in the world. So the media, sort of gives you the story that the elite wants you to hear. Because I worked in the mainstream media for many years, and you just sort of understood the unspoken rule of what you can and can't talk about. In fact, I remember when I was a reporter at the Daily News, I read one of Jim Marrs' books. This must have been like in the year 2000. Rule by Secrecy was a great book. And actually went to the newspaper and said, I read this incredible book and all this stuff about secret societies and all these different things. I remember my editor goes, shh, we don't talk about that around here. So, that was, 20, 25 years ago. So imagine what it's like today.
It's what Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis would call the deep earth state. Have you found since that day of being exposed to it through Jim Marrs that there are others who admit that there is such a deeper state active behind the scenes in Washington and other centers of power?
Yeah. I mean, that's been one of the amazing things over the last, decade, essentially. There's been many, former government officials, journalists that have come out and spoke openly about the existence of the deep state, about the power these, secret societies wield in our country and our world. And so, a lot of this is openly out there now. And in fact, polls show that something like 60-70% of Americans now believe there is a deep state. It does have inordinate power. It's operating outside the normal bounds of our Constitution, where, in America, we have the system where the people are supposed to elect our leaders, and they have the political power and are carrying out the people's will. But with the deep state idea, essentially you have these unelected people that are in the background pulling the strings, and it's completely undemocratic. And we're now witnessing the repercussions of this. I mean, we have this open border situation. We have millions of people coming into the country. There could be terrorists. There could be all kinds of murderers. Terrible people coming into our country. We have runaway inflation. Our national debt is now increasing at $1 trillion every 100 days, where we got $36 trillion just in national debt, not including unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. And pension systems across the country, government pension systems. It's, it's astronomical numbers. And governments around the world are trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. So this is why the World Economic Forum is talking about the Great Reset, some kind of financial reset of the world system that would move us into this digital system, possibly this this one world government. And so we're standing at a very critical time in history. We're on the brink of potentially World War III with the situation with the Middle East. China might attack Taiwan. Russia's already attacked Ukraine. We just, the debacle in Afghanistan under the Biden administration, chaos has been unleashed upon the world. And so I would encourage people to go vote this November, vote biblical values, and push back against this evil agenda. I think God's put the ball in our court, and He's expecting us to do what good Christian soldiers are called to do throughout history. It's never been easy, and now the time to. Think about President Trump. He was almost killed just by a miracle. He turned his head at the last moment, and then what did he do? He got up and he said, "Fight, fight, fight!" So it's very inspirational. How many people would do that? And so I think that's why God is using him, because he just, even though he's a flawed individual and may run people the wrong way, he has this character of bravery and courage, which is vital, especially for America, because it's been brave and courageous men and women that have were instrumental in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II. We pushed back against the demonic Nazi onslaught and saved the world. And so I'm hoping that Americans will rise again to the occasion and do the same thing this time today.
Assuming that President Trump is elected for a second term, becoming the first American president since Grover Cleveland, I think, who served 2 terms but not consecutively, there would be much rejoicing among many American Christians, but what would be the real impact of that? In other words, you mentioned earlier that we're not electing Jesus into the White House. So since we're not voting for a pastor-in-chief, what would be the net effect for America and for Christians specifically of a second Trump term?
Well, I think it would put a halt to this push for the Great Reset plan, at least put it on hold. There probably would be, who knows what kind of chaos would be unleashed by President Trump getting realected. We've watched what happened last time, right, during this whole tumultuous thing. It'll probably be tied up in the courts. There'll probably be legal fights. It's probably going to be a chaotic time, just like, probably Ingersoll Lockwood foresaw with the last president. But ultimately, I would hope that we would see this revival grow. The Holy Spirit seems to be working through all this, not just through President Trump, but through, many different, faith leaders, many different people, just Christians in general. And so we're seeing that phenomena, growing, it seems like. And, the policies that the Trump administration is proposing would probably, hopefully, be good for our economy, for freedom, because we've seen sort of, many signs of persecution with this administration of Christians. We've seen this administration, to a certain extent turn against Israel, and God tells us in the Bible that Israel is the apple of his eye. And if we turn our back, I think one of the big reasons why America's been so blessed for all these centuries is because we support Israel. And if we stop, and God's used us to spread the gospel around the world. So if we stop doing that, or at least pull back from that, or propose this, move forward this 2-state solution, it seemed like I think William Koenig had pointed out in one of his books that every time we make some kind of move towards a 2-state solution or something like that, we have a natural disaster here in America. So I think God is trying to keep us awake to what His center of focus is in the world, and it is Israel.
Yeah, we were in Israel back in 2018 when the U.S. Embassy was formally moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was just by, hand of God. Sharon picked out the dates of our Israel tour months in advance. Well, let's have it coincide with the 70th anniversary of Israel's Declaration of Independence, and that's the day that Trump decreed the embassy would move. So we were in Israel the very first day that the new signs went up in Jerusalem, American Embassy this way. But rather than chaos on the streets, there was rejoicing. There was celebrating. Donald Trump is far more popular in Israel than he is here in the United States. And so what is coming in November, regardless of how it plays out, and I would just remind viewers of the very wise observation made by our friend Pastor Carl Gallups. The day after the election in 2020, the Lord did not slap himself in the forehead and say, boy, I didn't see that coming. So regardless of how this plays out, the Lord's got it. He's in control. And things will play out the way he intends for them to play out. If Trump gets back in, we get another reprieve to continue carrying out our great commission, which is our prime directive, to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. One final question, Troy. Ingersoll Lockwood, in that third Baron Trump novel, saw this president who's elected and then chaos ensues as the last president. Do you anticipate the liberal media currently freaking out about wealthy Christians like the families behind Uline and Hobby Lobby collaborating through an organization called Ziklag to try to motivate Republican voters to get out and vote this fall? They're freaking out about this. Do you think one of them at some point is going to notice this Baron Trump novel and say, see, we told you Trump is going to end all the elections?
Well, that's a very good point. They very well blame it on Ingersoll Lockwood, right?
Yeah.
He's going to help in democracy.
That's it. And Trump's going to try to fulfill the prophecy by... I just laugh. I laugh because as we look around at our society, I just don't see an America that's just ready and waiting to embrace a Christian theocracy with open arms. But we look forward to that day when our Lord returns, and that's when it will happen. Troy Anderson is the author of the new book, The Trump Code. It will be available on September 17th. It's an intriguing look at the 45th and perhaps 47th president of the United States and what may be a prediction of his return to office through a series of obscure novels written more than 120 years ago. Troy, thanks for taking time out, and we look forward to seeing how this all plays out as we move deeper into the book of Revelation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Derek. Great honor. God bless you.
Check the notes below, whether you're watching or listening to this podcast, for a link to Troy Anderson's website. He's got a couple. He is a gifted writer and very prolific as well, and insightful when it comes to end times prophecy. Interesting in that you've got a Pulitzer Prize Award nominated journalist who studies end times prophecy and then applies his skill set to that study. Well worth reading. Coming up, we will look at the vice presidential pick of Kamala Harris. Bless her pointy little head, and some news about the next conference on the schedule, the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering in North Dakota. I've got a special guest who's now added to the lineup. Tell you about that and more as A View from the Bunker continues straight ahead.
Giants, gods, dragons, they're all real. We may not see them with our natural eyes, but their handiwork is evident in what's happening in the world around us, the spiritual warfare taking place.
It is so true. It's obvious in Israel, but worldwide. Historically, we've seen this happen. And we want you to get excited about the Old Testament and the New and the giants, gods, and dragons within it, because your kids need this information. So do you.
Yes. We're living in prophetic times. Help make sense of it with our special offer through July. Our book, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, which takes a fresh look at end times prophecy. My book's Bad Moon Rising, about the spiritual forces behind Islam. And Last Clash of the Titans, the overlap between what we were told is Greek mythology and the Bible. And our DVD, based on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. All of this, an $80 value for just $45 plus shipping and handling. Now through July, only at our online store, gilberthouse.org/store.
Driving the internet to think every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You find us online at vftb.net. That is the podcast homepage. You'll also find us at gilberthouse.org. That's the web hub for everything that Sharon and I do. My personal website, derekpgilbert.com, where you get a lot of excerpts of my books. In fact, a couple of books. You can get pretty much the whole thing as long as you're willing to scroll through my website to read all the pieces. On social media, Twitter at View from Bunker. Sorry, X, formerly Twitter, at View from Bunker, at Derek Gilbert, and at Gilbert House _TV. You'll also find us on Truth Social, Gab Me We Get Her, at Derek P. Gilbert on YouTube. If you're watching there, God bless you. At Gilbert House is the address. Please subscribe, click the bell for notifications, hit the like button, and then please download our free mobile app. That app guarantees we never get canceled by the tech companies because all the content on the app, which is this podcast, our weekly audio podcast, PIE Radio, which goes back to 2005, our Bible study, Unraveling Revelation, and soon the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, coming back and on the Gilbert House app as well. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/app, gilberthouse.org/app, also available at vftb.net. Check the top menu bar there for the link. Well, this week, as the election draws ever nearer, we're just 3 months out from Election Day. Kamala Harris announced her vice presidential pick. Contrary to expectations, most people looking at it thought it would be Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Instead, it's Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. This was a bit of a surprise because Shapiro is very popular in the state of Pennsylvania, which is a critical swing state. Democrats really need to win Pennsylvania and Michigan, Wisconsin. Well, both parties. These are important battleground states. And Shapiro would have brought her a couple of things. First of all, probably would have carried Pennsylvania, which is an important hall of electoral college delegates. That would have been very important, but also would have helped her burnish her image a little bit regarding her stance on Israel with independent voters. Because Harris has been very anti-Israel, I would say. She was very disrespectful to Prime Minister Netanyahu when he visited the country recently, did not attend his address to Congress, did not meet him at the tarmac when he landed in the United States. This was a very disrespectful way to deal with a man that we keep saying is the leader of America's best ally in the Middle East. Bringing in the Jewish governor of a popular Jewish governor of an important swing state would have been the obvious choice for political reasons, but because Shapiro, 30 years ago, as a college student, wrote an op-ed piece for his campus newspaper arguing that Palestinian Arabs don't want peace, that a two-state solution will never work to solve the Israeli-Arab conflict because the Palestinian Arabs don't want to live peacefully side by side or next door to Israel. They want war. They want to take the whole land. Shapiro last week was trying to walk that back, basically saying, I have matured since then and I've gotten more liberal. That rarely happens. Usually you go the other way around. Because 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was in college, I was a lot more sympathetic to the Palestinian Arab cause because I'd been soaking in the message from the corporate media for all my life, which is far more sympathetic to Palestinian Arabs than it is to the Israeli Jews. When you start reading some history and see the way things really have unfolded in that land for the last 100 years, you realize that the story that we're told in the West is not the actual history of what has transpired. As I think it was Churchill said, my father quoted it, and I've never looked up the original source of the quote, but it basically goes like this. If you're not a liberal when you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, you have no brain. So for Governor Shapiro to have gone more liberal over the past 3 decades suggests that he has simply modified his beliefs to accommodate his political aspirations. Setting that aside, it still would have been a good move for the Harris campaign to just tell the far left wing of her party to pipe down and shut up, because they needed Shapiro and the state of Pennsylvania to carry her to election victory in November. But by selecting Tim Walz, you get the governor of a state that is already going to vote Democrat. Minnesotans have not voted for a Republican president. I should say a majority of them have not voted for a Republican president as long as I've been alive. That's more than 6 decades now. So they're not going to vote for Trump this time around. So getting Tim Walz brings nothing in terms of electoral votes. It also is kind of an unforced error, or as you Brits might say, an own goal, basically scoring against their own side, because Tim Walz has some baggage that will be exploited by the Trump campaign. He refused to send in the Minnesota National Guard to quell the riots in late May, early June of 2020 for several days. Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, asked the governor for the National Guard after rioting broke out. You remember the fiery but mostly peaceful protests? Governor Walz refused to send the National Guard in for 3 days because he said it would just make the rioting worse. A lot of confidence in the National Guard soldiers there, Governor Walz. It would make the rioting worse, and besides, people needed to blow off some steam. So burning black-owned businesses and police cars and committing acts of violence, that's okay because the cause is just. You better believe this is going to come up on the campaign trail. There's also Governor Walz and his rather draconian policies during the pandemic, setting up a hotline for Minnesotans to squeal on their neighbors if they were outside without a mask. Like, come on, that's not going to play well here in Middle America. And there are other things, like his executive order making Minnesota a sanctuary state for youth confused about their gender. Mom and dad don't want to let you get the affirming care. Now, come to Minnesota. We'll take care of it for you. Basically, the most liberal state east of California and west of New York. More liberal than Illinois, even. That's who Kamala Harris has chosen for her running mate. It is, I'm not alone in saying this. I see other pundits as well, just sort of scratching our heads and saying it is really not clear what Tim Walz contributes to the Kamala Harris ticket. Well, he's the one guy that the Trump campaign was really hoping she would select. She has now done it. Again, this is an own goal. This is an unforced error, and it could be that Harris just isn't self-confident enough to stand up to the left wing of her party. Don't know. Whatever. Bless her pointy little head. Going to be in North Dakota, a state to which many Minnesotans have fled to get away from the left-wing policies of Minnesota. Just in about a month, September 7th and 8th, this is the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering in Valley City, North Dakota. It actually runs 6th, 7th, and 8th. I was speaking on Saturday and Sunday. The 7th and the 8th, be talking about The Gates of Hell, which is the title of our forthcoming book that's coming out in October. Sharon and me, we now have a publication date. The Gates of Hell coming in October. We'll be talking about that on Saturday. Then on Sunday, The Secret History of Israel. This is the hidden history that led to the creation or the recreation of the independent Jewish state in 1948. A lot of things happened behind the scenes. A lot of skullduggery because, well, we're going to actually take this presentation and turn it into a sort of documentary here in the near future. Working with Joe Horn, Skywatch TV on this. This is something that we'll be putting out there, but I will be giving this presentation again, the same one that I gave at the Go Therefore conference in Ohio a couple of weeks ago. That'll be coming up September 7th and 8th. But the organizers there, Wyatt Furno, and the organizers of the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering have added Dr. Doug Hamp as a speaker. Doug will be coming up from Denver, and so the two of us will be sharing a microphone and a stage there at the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering. It's at the Eagles Club in Valley City, North Dakota, September 7th and 8th. And I hope to see you there. There's more information at our website. You can also find it on our app under the calendar section, upcoming events, and at the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering Facebook page, of course, on Facebook. By the way, speaking of the Go Therefore conference, there were some folks who asked about getting access to the streaming video because, God bless him, John Haller gave us a shout out on his prophecy update this past Sunday. John came over from Columbus and basically came out to see my presentation. And I take that as high praise because John's weekly prophecy update, and I'll link to that in the notes, because if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel and watching John's updates, it's basically a week in review of news with prophetic significance. And he does an excellent job in relating what we're seeing happening around the world, especially in the Middle East, to Bible prophecy. So John came out and he recommended people get the streaming video package just to watch my presentation. And again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here. I'm just letting you know how much I appreciate that word of endorsement and encouragement from John Haller, because he is a gentleman I truly respect, both as a man and as a student of end times prophecy. I would also suggest that seeing the presentations by Joe Artis Horn talking about why we do what we do at Skywatch TV, the work at Whispering Ponies Ranch, trying to help children at risk, is worth seeing. And I will say, as I've said before, when you watch Joe's presentation, make sure you have tissues handy, because it is very emotional and very powerful. But you've also got talks by Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Pastor Carl Gallups, a recorded presentation by Dr. Judd Burton. So a lot of good stuff. Tom Dunn as well. All worth it. So if you're interested, the streaming video package is still available from the Go Therefore Conference. It's at GoThereforeConference.com, and click there and you'll get access to the videos. Sharon's presentation, which is a dramatic reading of a short story that illustrates the risk posed by independent artificial intelligence or autonomous AI. A short story called The Return of Kronos. Well worth it, because she really gets into it and does a dramatic reading, basically. So well worth it. This was one of the best conferences that we've been blessed to be a part of, and you can still take part in it long distance by getting the streaming video package from GoThereforeConference.com. Coming up in December, we'll be in Branson for the Prophecy Watchers Christmas in Branson Prophecy Conference. This is going to be quite a gathering. L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Ken Johnson, Billy Crone, Mondo Gonzalez, Josh Peck, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, and many others. And we're honored to be a part of this and take part in that presentation, that conference. You can find out more online at prophecywatchers.com. Also, Branson Christmas Prophecy Conference.com. Links at our website, also on our app under the calendar section. Now, as far as our Israel trips are concerned, November, we are looking at being in Israel for another solidarity mission, November 6th through 13th. However, what happens this coming week will obviously have a lot of will have an impact on what we decide to do. As of this recording, and I'm recording this around noon on Wednesday, just to timestamp it, Wednesday, August 7th, Western intelligence sources told Sky News Arabia within the last few days that they expected Iran to respond to the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, probably on Tisha B'Av. That's the 9th of Av on the Hebrew calendar. That's a significant date because that is the date historically in 586 BC when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Solomon's temple. It is also the date that the Romans in 70 AD destroyed the Second Temple. Muslims like to do things on significant dates. The attack last October 7th of 2023, was 50 years and a day from the Yom Kippur War, the outbreak of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. It also fell on Simchat Torah and on Shabbat, holy days on the Hebrew calendar. Muslims like to try to desecrate those days with acts of war. So Western intelligence was telling, news contacts that they expected the outbreak of war between Iran and its proxies and Israel on Tisha B'Av. Now that's Monday. Begins at sundown Monday, the 12th of August. So if you're watching this on Sunday night, that would be tomorrow. If war has not already broken out by the time you see this, because there are others who thought that, no, that's just too obvious. They'll do it when it's less expected. But again, there's an esoteric or a supernatural reason for trying to do it on an important day, a day important to Jews. So if that's the case, then that would be tomorrow, and obviously that would have an impact on what we're going to do in November and possibly even next spring for the Israel tour planned for March 25th through April 3rd. We'll see what happens. I did note, and somebody alerted me to this, so I appreciate the heads up. I try to catch as much as I can, but I'm not. I don't catch everything. But they pointed out a news report from Russia confirming that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is traveling to Russia tomorrow on August 12th to consult with the Russian government, meet with Vladimir Putin, and so forth. So, is that coincidence? Or is Abbas getting out of Israel before the missiles start flying? Don't know, but I wouldn't be too surprised. I mean, it could be, and this was reported as early as Monday of this week, so this is not news by the time you're watching this. It's just an interesting data point that may not be coincidental. It's possible that Abbas knows that something is coming on Tisha B'Av and plans to be out of the area just in case missiles go off course and start hitting cities in Judea and Samaria, like, Ramallah or Nablus. So we will see. Just ask you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, not because we care about our tours, but because there are a lot of innocent people who'll be caught in the crossfire, and we don't wish anybody dead. Israeli, Arab, Jew, Christian, Muslim. We don't want anybody dying over there through violence. But sadly, you can only have peace if both sides agree. And as Josh Shapiro correctly wrote 30 years ago, there is only one side in the Middle East that truly desires peace. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen wherever you may be consuming this podcast. Again, if it's YouTube, thank you, but then please protect yourself by downloading our free mobile app for iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. If you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, we're everywhere fine podcasts are sold. Please give us a thumbs up, a like, or a review if you got an extra moment. Our announcer is the inimitable D.C. Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Good night, Oliver, wherever you are. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is A View from the Bunker.